My wife-to-be straddled the male stripper and kissed him during her bachelorette party, 6 days after promising me there would be no physical contact. Her name is Brooke, I'm Nathan, and I saw it because she asked me to bring the overnight bag she had forgotten in our hallway. I set the bag down, told her our wedding was canceled, and left before the song ended. The boundary had not been vague. 8 days before the party, Brooke and I were eating takeout at the kitchen island while she answered messages from her maid of honor, Kelsey. Kelsey had rented the upper floor of a restaurant downtown. There would be dinner, dancing, a private bartender, and as Brooke finally admitted, a male stripper arriving after dessert. I did not tell her she could not have one. I did tell her what would change my decision to marry her. No kissing, I said. No sitting on him, no hands under clothes, and no disappearing into another room. If those are part of the plan, tell me now. Brooke put down her phone. Do you really think I need to be told not to have sex with a stripper? I didn't say sex. I said the things I'm not willing to watch become a joke later. She said Kelsey had booked a performer, not an affair. The women would laugh, put dollar bills in his waistband, and send embarrassing pictures to the group chat. Brooke would probably stand in the back because she hated being made the center of attention. That last part was untrue in a way I should have recognized. Brooke loved being the center of attention as long as she could pretend someone else had pushed her there. At birthday dinners, she resisted the cake until the entire table chanted her name. At karaoke, she needed 3 people to beg before taking the microphone, then chose the longest song. If a man complimented her, she acted embarrassed but repeated the compliment to me on the drive home. None of that had stopped me from trusting her. We had been together 5 years. I knew her need for a room to turn toward her, and I believed she knew the difference between enjoying attention and using our relationship as the price of admission. We were supposed to marry the following Saturday at a converted mill outside the city. 112 guests had confirmed. My dark suit hung at my brother Ryan's house so Brooke would not see it. Her dress was with her mother. The wedding band sat in a small walnut box in the top drawer of my desk. Brooke reached across the kitchen island that night and covered my hand. I promise, she said, no kissing, no lap, no hands anywhere private. I will make Kelsey promise too if that makes you feel better. It needs to be your promise. It is. Then she smiled and asked whether we could stop holding a committee hearing about a silly party. The night of the bachelorette party, Brooke wore a short white dress and silver heels. She had rejected the novelty veil Kelsey bought because she said it looked cheap. Before leaving, she turned slowly in front of me and asked whether she still looked like someone about to become a respectable married woman. You look like the woman I'm marrying in a week, I said. She kissed me, picked up her purse, and left the overnight bag beside the coat rack. I noticed it 20 minutes later. It held her change of clothes, makeup remover, glasses, medication, and the flat shoes she planned to wear in the morning. I texted her a picture. She called immediately from Kelsey's phone because hers was connected to the restaurant speaker. Please save me, she said. Can you bring it? I'm not walking through the hotel lobby tomorrow in this dress. The women were staying at a hotel 2 blocks from the restaurant. I had no plans beyond watching a game at Ryan's apartment, so I said I would bring it on my way. Leave it with the hostess downstairs, Brooke said. Kelsey will grab it. There was no suspicion in me while I drove downtown. I remember that clearly because I spent months afterward wondering whether some part of me had expected what happened. It had not. I was irritated by traffic and thinking about whether Ryan had ordered enough food. I was still a man performing a small favor for the woman he would marry in 6 days. The hostess recognized Brooke's name, but said everyone working the private floor was busy. She pointed to a staircase behind a velvet rope. They said deliveries can go up, she told me. I climbed with the overnight bag over my shoulder. The music grew louder at the landing. The door to the private room was open. I could see a bar on the left, a long table covered in empty glasses, and about 15 women gathered around a low leather chair. Brooke was in the chair. The stripper was seated beneath her, shirtless, wearing black pants. Brooke had one knee on either side of his thighs. Her white dress had ridden high enough that Kelsey was standing behind her holding the hem down for the room, not for modesty. The man had one hand inside the open back of Brooke's dress and the other under the fabric at her thigh. The women counted down from 3. Brooke took his face in both hands and kissed him on the mouth. It was not a surprised peck. She pressed into him while the room screamed. She pulled back, laughed at something he said, and kissed him again. Then she looked toward the door. Her expression did not begin with guilt. It began with annoyance, as if I had entered before the scene was ready to end. Kelsey saw me next. The cheering broke apart unevenly. One woman lowered her phone. Another turned away. The stripper removed his hands and started to stand, but Brooke remained across his lap for 1 second longer, staring at me. I did not shout. I did not ask what I had seen. I did not pull out my phone or demand that anyone delete theirs. I walked to the end of the table and placed Brooke's overnight bag beside her purse. "Nathan," she said, "the wedding is canceled." Someone stopped the music. Brooke climbed off the man and pulled at her dress. "Wait, Nate, wait. Your bag is here." I turned and walked downstairs. She caught me outside the elevator in the restaurant lobby. She was barefoot, carrying her heels, with the white dress crooked at one shoulder. Kelsey stood several feet behind her holding the ridiculous veil Brooke had refused to wear. "That was the entire thing," Brooke said. "You saw the worst 10 seconds of a joke. I saw you break every boundary you promised. I didn't go anywhere private with him. I didn't have sex with him. You straddled him. He had his hands under your dress. You kissed him twice. The second kiss was part of the countdown." For a moment, I thought I had heard her wrong. "That is your defense." She looked at Kelsey, then back at me. Everybody was yelling. I got carried away. This is what bachelorette parties are. It has nothing to do with us. I pressed the elevator button. Brooke stepped in front of the doors. "You cannot cancel a wedding over a performance. I'm canceling it over your choice. We have guests flying in. Then we should tell them tonight." She began to cry. Kelsey told me Brooke had been nervous all week, that the performer had pulled her into the chair, and that everyone had pushed the kiss because it was her last big night before marriage. I asked Kelsey whether the stripper had also forced Brooke to kiss him a second time. Neither of them answered. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside alone. Brooke called me 12 times during the drive to Ryan's apartment. I let the phone ring through the car speakers. At a red light, a message appeared on the dashboard. "Please don't humiliate me, because I made one stupid mistake." That sentence settled something in me. She was still measuring the damage by what other people would see. The humiliation was not sitting on another man after promising me she would not. The humiliation was having to explain why the wedding disappeared. Ryan opened his door with a plate in his hand and took one look at me. "What happened?" I told him in 3 sentences. He put the plate down, moved a pile of laundry off the spare bed, and said I could stay as long as I needed. I did not sleep. At 2 in the morning, I opened the shared wedding spreadsheet on my phone. Venue, florist, photographer, band, officiant. I felt the temptation to turn grief into a task list because tasks have boxes and endings. I closed it. There was only one call I needed to make before I did anything else. At 7, I drove back to our apartment. Brooke was sitting at the kitchen island in the same white dress with one of my sweatshirts over it. Her makeup had been wiped away except for a black line under one eye. The overnight bag sat at her feet, unopened. The walnut ring box was on the counter. She had taken it from my desk. "I thought seeing these would remind you what we are about to lose," she said. I opened the box. Both bands were still inside. I removed them and laid them on top of one of our wedding invitations, directly across our printed names. "We already lost it upstairs," I said. "No, I did something disgusting for maybe 30 seconds. 5 years do not disappear because of 30 seconds. They don't disappear. They are why I gave your promise so much weight." Brooke said she needed me to hear the full story before making a permanent decision. The stripper called her up because Kelsey had told him which woman was the bride. He sat down and pulled Brooke toward him. She said she resisted at first. The room booed. Someone shouted that she was making marriage look like prison. Brooke had been drinking. Everyone had a phone pointed at her, and she wanted the moment to end with people cheering instead of pitying her. "So I sat on him," she said. "He put his hands where you saw. I let him. I kissed him twice. I'm not lying about any part of it." It was the first clean admission she had given me. "Why did the room matter more than your promise?" I asked. "It didn't." "Then the promise would have one." She folded forward over the counter. She said she had spent the last year hearing women describe marriage as the point when a woman became invisible. The bachelorette party had made her feel desired in a loud, uncomplicated way. She wanted one reckless moment before being expected to act like someone's wife forever. "Someone's wife," I repeated. "That is not what I meant." "It is exactly what you meant. You treated marrying me as the end of being wanted and breaking my trust as the final proof that you still could be." She asked whether I had ever wanted another woman. I said yes. She asked whether I had ever imagined kissing one. I said imagination was not the promise on our kitchen island and not another woman's hands under my clothes 6 days before our wedding. Then she made the offer I think she had been building toward all night. I could postpone the wedding instead of canceling it. We could tell the guests there was a family emergency. She would pay every lost deposit from her savings. She would stop speaking to Kelsey, give me access to her phone, and go to counseling for as long as I wanted. If I needed to kiss someone else to feel even, she would accept it. "I don't want another woman," I said. "I wanted the woman who made me that promise." I called the officiant while Brooke sat across from me. He answered on the third ring. I told him the wedding would not take place and that I would contact the venue after our families knew. He did not ask for a reason. He said he was sorry. Brooke covered her face when I ended the call. I packed enough clothes for a week. Before leaving, I picked up the invitation with the 2 bands on it and placed it in front of her. "You wanted one last night before being my wife," I said. "You can have every night after it without being my wife." I did not post an announcement or send the video around. There was no video in my possession anyway. I called my parents, my brother, and the 2 friends who had already boarded flights. Brooke called her side. By noon, the wedding website said the event was canceled. The explanations arrived before the sympathy did. Her mother called me and said Brooke had confessed everything. She agreed the behavior was awful but asked me to consider the scale of the consequence. The venue deposit alone was more than her first car had cost. Relatives had bought tickets. Brooke's grandmother had planned to travel despite her health. "I understand the cost," I said. "Then why decide today?" "Because if the cost can make me marry her, it was never a wedding. It was an invoice." My own father was less gentle. He said people panic before marriage and that a husband should know the difference between one shameful act and a bad partner. I asked whether he thought the act would become smaller after I signed the license. He did not answer directly. He told me not to make anger permanent. I was angry, but anger was not why I stayed away. Anger would have pulled me back into the room to compete with the noise. What kept me away was the clarity of Brooke looking at me from another man's lap and appearing irritated that I had arrived. 3 days after the canceled wedding, Kelsey asked to meet me. I almost refused. then agreed to 10 minutes at a coffee shop because she said Brooke had been changing the story. Kelsey admitted the stripper had not forced anything. She had told him Brooke was the bride and told him to push the act because Brooke would perform resistance before joining in. When the room booed, Brooke laughed. After the first kiss, the performer asked whether she wanted him to stop. Brooke said, "Not while they're filming." Then she kissed him again. "I thought the rules you gave her were controlling," Kelsey said. "I told everyone you would never actually walk away this close to the wedding." "Did Brooke agree?" Kelsey looked down at her coffee. "She said you would be furious, but you loved her too much to cancel." There it was. Brooke had not lost control because the room was loud. She had calculated that my love would absorb whatever the room rewarded. I thanked Kelsey for telling me and left. I did not use her admission to punish Brooke. I did not need a stronger case. I needed to stop letting other people argue me away from what I already knew. Brooke moved in with her mother while I stayed with Ryan. We ended the lease when it expired. She kept the furniture she had bought. I took my books, my tools, and the walnut ring box without the rings. The jeweler bought the bands back for less than half what we paid. I did not care about the loss. What hurt were the ordinary plans that had no refund. The Sunday mornings, the names we had discussed for children, the dent in the couch where Brooke put her feet under my leg. For weeks, I reached for my phone when something funny happened and remembered that the person I wanted to tell was also the person I no longer trusted with my life. Brooke wrote me a letter a month later. She said canceling the wedding had finally made her understand that commitment was not a reward waiting after one last performance. She said she had wanted strangers to envy her freedom and had assumed I would preserve the future when she refused to protect it. She asked for one conversation without Kelsey, parents, deposits, or the wedding date between us. I agreed. We met in the park where I proposed. Brooke looked thinner. She did not wear the ring. She apologized without mentioning alcohol, pressure, or the performer. She said she had broken the exact promise I asked for because she wanted to prove she could break it and still be chosen. "I know why you canceled," she said. "I just need to know whether there is any version of us after this." I told her there would always be a version of us in my memory. 5 years did not become fake, but memory was not a marriage, and loving what we had did not require me to offer it again. She cried quietly. I sat with her until she was ready to leave. Then we walked to different parking lots. On the Saturday that should have been our wedding, Ryan asked whether I wanted company. I said no. I drove to the mill anyway, not to confront anyone but to see whether the date still owned me. Another event was being set up inside. A delivery van blocked the entrance. 2 workers carried white chairs across the courtyard, and none of them knew my name. I stayed in the car for less than a minute. The wedding had been expensive to cancel. The future we planned was painful to surrender, but neither cost was a reason to make a wife out of someone who treated my boundary as part of the entertainment. Brooke wanted one last night when a room full of people could decide what our promise meant. I canceled the wedding because the room never had that authority. Only we did, and when her moment came to choose, she handed our promise to the crowd.